Second match of the 1996 Survivor Series in Madison Square Garden. And we had a second traditional Survivor Series elimination tag team match. Mike,
Yep, and
um,
who comes out to open? Who comes out to get on commentary since Jerry the King Lawler left? None other than, no, not James E. Cornette. It's Sunny. Sunny comes
Sunny.
out. My God, she
Yeah.
was gorgeous back in the day, and she was probably, at the time, banging Sean. But that's just how it goes right there. Like,
Oh my god, dude. Uh yes, that's so funny, dude. Yeah, Sonny was out there and Vince McMahon couldn't be happier. And the whole time when I saw, Sonny walk over to the announce table, Vince McMahon stands up with that fucking grin on his face.
oh
And
yeah,
the whole time I'm just thinking, oh man, Vince. Old man Vince, good old Vince.
yeah, Vinnie
He's
Mac.
never changed. Yeah.
You hear all these stories, you hear all these interviews, and then after hearing all these interviews, and you watch these back then, knowing what you know now. I mean,
Yeah.
you have to understand it's a product of its time, and you enjoy it for the talent that was then, not for the people that you learned who they are now. And I have to say, Terry Runnels is fucking gorgeous, even to this day, gorgeous. That cigar in her hand, escorting or valeting for Dustin Rhodes slash Goldust at the time, because you had Crush, who was Brian Adams, and then you had Jerry the King Lawler, and then you had Hunter Hearst Helmsley at the time, who was Intercontinental Champion, and
Yep.
then of course Goldust with that with that gimmick that made him so famous.
Yeah. Yeah, that was the first team. I want to say those were the heels, right? Yeah, that was a
Yes,
heel team. Yeah, because Hunter Hart Helmsley was the total heel with that what was it, like a British gimmick?
he had
Or what
the
was
well,
it?
it was his Blue Bloods. It was his Blue Bloods like gimmick from it was this Blue Bloods gimmick from WCW that he carried on
Mm,
with him over to that, because at over there he was John Paul Levesque, and
interesting.
once he came, yeah, he went from terrorizing to
Hmm.
John Paul Levesque, and then became Hunter Hearst Helmsley once he showed up in WWF. And then you had Crush. Crush just rebranded himself. He was no
Hmm.
longer Big Kona Crush. He was just Crush
Hmm. And on
with the
the other
braids and
team,
everything.
yeah, and on the other team, we had Mark Marrow, the Wild Man with Sable, um, the Stalker, Rocky Maivia, the Rock on his big debut, and or the Blue Chipper like they called him, and even Jim Ross said this is gonna be the guy right here, and what do you know? Look at he was Jim Ross. Jim Ross is usually right about these things. And the surprise partner for this team was Jake the Snake Roberts. But what stood out to me the most about this team, the babyface team, was the entrance that Mark Merrill got. This guy, he was presented like hot shit in this match. He had the pyro, he had the
Oh
girl, he
yeah.
had Sable. I don't remember too much about like this time where Mark Merrow, they were trying to make him a big deal, right? Because I just remember when Sable took over, when the fans decided that Sable was more important.
Yeah. Sable was starting to get a little more important, and then, Mark Marrow, quote unquote, Johnny B. Bad from WCW, he came in and they were really pushing him to be this high flyer that they saw in WCW. And then when you see who's like all on his team, I mean, you have Jake the Snake, you have Rocky Maivia, and then you have the Stalker. I'm like, and then looking later on in the years, I'm like, that's fucking Barry Windham. Holy shit. That's crazy. And then he would tag team with Bradshaw later on. They would become the new Blackjacks. And you're
Mm.
just like watching, like, I call I call 90s WWF like from 96 and before the precursors because you see some of the stuff and you're like, man, the shit that they became later on.
Yeah. I
And
also
then
thought,
they were rumoring that Mero as well had a very bad attitude backstage. Like he was like he was full of himself.
mhm,
And that's one of the things that will kill your push right there. That and also Sable was getting more popular than
yeah. Yeah, I also noticed like in the commentary, they were kind of trying to put Sunny and Sable against them. Like, oh, Sunny got over 1 million downloads on AOL, and this was a match that Sunny was commentating on, right?
yes.
Yeah. So, oh, well, Sable doesn't have that many downloads, so like that competition was kind of starting. It felt like during this time between those two, Sable and Sunny.
Yeah, if anyone wants to like know like what was going on between Sonny and Sable, I always say just go listen to Jim Cornette. He has like the best account for it because in other words, he was there. Him or Bruce Pritchard, they both have really good accounts of what was going on backstage at the time during this period. And
Yeah, but Cornette is a little biased because he loved Sunny and hated Sable.
he hated both of them. Like you have to listen a little more. I mean, his shoots are great. And
No, because
he
Sunny worked for him at Smoky Mountain.
until they left and or until her and Chris Candido left, and then they went
Mm,
to go start the Bobby Donnas, and they were doing great. And then once they left the ECW, that's when Jim Cornette was like, "No,
yeah,
no, you're gonna ruin this man's career because of what she was doing behind the scenes and everything."
yeah.
So
With Sean.
he he had he had a lot. No, he was biased a little bit because he had so much hope behind them because he saw something great in them.
Yeah,
It's just their choices and everything led up to where they led up to. And the unfortunate part is like Candido breaking his leg and then like dying of a blood clot because he went on a plane when he shouldn't have. And
yeah,
then you have Tammy Sitch who just couldn't stay off the booze and drugs and shit. And then you have her, she's doing time for the rest of her life probably for that DUI.
yeah. Well, going back to this match, Mike, real quick, you mentioned, the 1996, like this year being like the precursor and seeing what people became. I thought it was really interesting that on The Rock's debut,
Oh
Jerry the
yeah.
King Lawler was also part of this match, which was probably, I think, was done by design because wasn't it like right before this, before The Rock made his debut? Wasn't he in Memphis feuding with Jerry the King Lawler as what was it, Flex Cabana?
Yeah, he was Flex Cabana at the time. And for those of you that actually got to see Young Rock, like he covers this real good on there and about how he was wrestling on there, trained by his dad and Pat Patterson, and they ended up getting getting those two to score up in Memphis Pro Wrestling. I mean, at the time, I don't know if it was Jerry Jarrett running it or if it was
It
Jerry
was
Lawler running.
it was Jerry Lawler.
Okay, but Jerry Lawler was the top heel at the time. But he
Yeah.
was just loved and adored by Memphis, and he had a match with Rock, and Rock went over that. And then putting Jerry Lawler in here, Jerry Lawler made him look like $1 million
Mm-hmm. Yeah, because
because he was still
as soon
still
as the
new
Rock
and
got
still
tagged
green.
in, yeah. Go ahead.
Yeah, still new, still green, and his first time on the big stage was on a pay-per-view, especially on one of the big four. That's insane right there. So you could tell that they had a lot of hopes for him right there. But the one thing I never understood, I'm like, man, if he had never became The Rock and he stayed Rocky Maivia, that was interesting right there. Because at the time they were pushing him as this like mega baby face and everything, and then you had Chance showing up like Die Rocky Die and Rocky sucks and all of that. And so joining the Nation of Domination, and everything changed after that.
Yeah, they definitely had big plans for him, even on his debut. But not to skip ahead, but The Rock actually ended up getting the pin for his team at a big
Yeah.
Survivor Series match like this. And The Rock was the last man on his team, and he beat two of his opponents, which I thought was one hell of a debut at a Survivor Series, at a pay per view. You know, getting the pin for his team. This is how I guess you would put people over, even though it didn't really work out that way for The Rock. It took a while for him to really get over.
Oh yeah, it took him a while. I mean, he beat Crush with the crossbody, and after Crush misses The Rock with his finisher, the heart punch at the time, he was still using that move.
It was good, Anthony Graham. Shout out. Thank you for being here. Go ahead.
And then he pretty much finished it, goes shoulder breaker, one gets the 1, 2, 3, sole survivor. You know, it would be funny if in his next match he just drops one of those shoulder breakers out of nowhere just to humor us.
That's funny. You know what was also really cool? We got to see Jake the Snake. He brought out, you know, his pet python or whatever it was, Damien or whatever. I'm not sure if it was Damien or if he had different names for them, but we got to see the DDT. Jake the Snake got the first elimination for his team,
Oh yeah.
and that was like the DDT, man, the classic, the iconic DDT by Jake the Snake. It never failed, man. When he had you in that DDT form, you're done. It's over.
Oh yeah. Yeah, that was awesome. Just watching his like return to the ring, and then this was an interesting year because this year he had, I think he was feuding with because this was after King of the Ring where he lost to Austin of all people. And I don't
Yes.
know if it was earlier in the year or if it was later, but he had started feuding with Jerry Lawler. He
Yeah.
was feuding with Jerry Lawler, and he had just become like sober and stuff. And then they had a real big angle right there where Jerry Lawler was like making fun of his sobriety and then started pouring Jack Daniels. It was probably gimmicked. It probably wasn't though. And so you had a bit of that right there, and just Austin though. Austin. I mean, do I have to say anything else about the next match? This next match,
Wait, but we're
because that's
not there yet because you
we're
just
not there
reminded
yet.
me of something. No, you just reminded me of something because we mentioned how this pay per view in 1996, a lot of people say this is the beginning of the Attitude Era, right? Or, you know, a lot of people have said that. This was right after the King of the Ring that Stone Cold Steve Austin won. In this Survivor Series match, the elimination tag match, the classic Survivor Series tag match. Triple H was in this as the Intercontinental Champion. Wasn't
Hmm.
Triple H supposed to win that King of the Ring that Austin won?
Yes,
Right?
yes, and you could blame the curtain call for that.
And that's the reason why Austin had won that King of the Ring, and that's when he cut the promo. Austin 316 said, "I just whooped your ass." And
Exactly.
but could you imagine though if the roles were switched. Instead of Triple H being on this Survivor Series match as an Intercontinental Champion, Austin is in the Survivor Series match as an Intercontinental Champion, and Triple H is facing Bret Hart later on the show. I don't know. It's just
Yeah,
crazy to think about.
in a different timeline, I still think Austin and Brett would have still feuded, but I think it would have been a
No.
different premise right there. But the good news is for all the Triple H fans watching, he did win King of the Ring the next year with China as his valet at the time because him and China were together.
Yeah.
And so it turned it. the timeline meshes very well now that you look back on this,
Yeah,
and
I
I'm like,
mean he's doing
you know,
pretty good for himself right now, so I think it all worked
I
out.
he looks like that guy that runs a company, you know.
I think so. Yeah, yeah, he does look like Papa H. That's right.
He looks like that guy that gets mad at a certain Kevin Owens for taking the gold, the eagle belt, and I'm like, oh, that
I'm
eagle
gonna say
belt.
my